Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the massive macroeconomic and geopolitical shifts that are literally rewiring the global balance of power. We are pulling directly from deep analyses by wealth managers like Julius Baer, foreign policy experts and scholars, to understand what's really happening beneath the surface of the daily news cycle. Let's kick things off with a massive question. Think about this for a second. What happens when non-U.S. investors, who are sitting on a staggering $19 trillion in U.S. equities, suddenly realize the system is on the brink of profound change? Are the rules of the game fundamentally shifting after 8 decades of globalization? Well, let's find out. To unpack all this, we're looking at geopolitics, finance, and technology. We'll cover the return of the big cycle, the rise of BRICS Plus, de-dollarization and new money, artificial intelligence by 2035, and finally, navigating a multi-order world. All right, Section 1, the big cycle returns. Let's look back at history to see why these massive global transitions are actually completely predictable. It's so easy for us to assume the current global structure is just permanent, right? But do global empires and their dominant currencies last forever? Well, if we look at historical data, the answer is a hard no. What we're experiencing today is actually just one phase in a much, much longer historical pattern. What's really fascinating here is the big cycle. It's a framework popularized by Ray Dalio in his book, The Changing World Order. And it shows us that just like business cycles, empires have definitive lifespans. They rise and they fall based on totally predictable drivers, things like education, debt, and conflict. It basically means that a nation's absolute dominance eventually, inevitably, wanes. Look at how the cornerstone of global trade has shifted over the last 500 years. We went from early European colonial expansions in the 16th century to the era of British pound sterling dominance in the 19th century, and then to 1944 when the Bretton Woods system anchored the US dollar. Today, we are actively transitioning away from that unipolar hegemony. The British pound's decline was gradual, packed with deep institutional changes, which gives us a pretty good hint at what we might see next. Moving on to Section 2, the rise of BRICS Plus. As the American cycle matures, let's see who's stepping up to challenge the institutional status quo. The contrast here is absolutely striking. On one side, you've got the G7, advanced economies like the US, UK, and Japan. These were the architects of the post-W2 order, shaping things through Bretton Woods institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. But on the flip side, you have BRICS Plus. This is an expanding bloc of emerging economies aiming to challenge that Western dominance. How? By building alternative financial systems like the new development bank so they aren't tied down by Western conditionalities. And they are growing fast. Over 2024 and 2025, BRICS Plus underwent a massive expansion. They officially welcomed Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, plus 9 newly introduced partner countries. This is a huge deal. It demonstrates the growing weight of the Global South, creating this formidable, unified voice on international politics and trade to counterbalance Western influence. Which brings us to Section 3, de-dollarization and new money. Let's explore the financial battleground where the most direct challenge to U.S. hegemony is currently unfolding. 121%. That is the staggering U.S. debt to GDP ratio right now. To put that into perspective, that is double the benchmark for fiscal sustainability, and honestly, it is severely eroding global confidence in the dollar. Mix that with policy uncertainty and questions about the Federal Reserve's independence, and you can see why investors and central banks are actively trying to diversify away from a purely dollar-centric order. But the real push for alternatives comes down to this growing perception that the United States has weaponized the dollar's role in international finance, using economic sanctions and kicking Russian financial institutions out of the SWIFT system. That fundamentally shattered trust in the idea of a neutral, dollar-based system. Now, nations are actively looking for workarounds. Just look at the numbers here. China now leads the world in foreign exchange reserves. And sure, the US dollar still beats the euro globally, but its share of global reserves has dropped from 66% in 2015 down to 57% today. Interestingly, the European Union is actually pretty well positioned to partially capitalize on this shift, if they proactively deepen their financial union, though they definitely face their own structural constraints. Meanwhile, we are seeing real-time experiments with alternative settlements. The rise of the Petroyuan and China's digital RMB are pioneering non-dollar cross-border transactions. Plus, the BRICS bloc is developing their own digital currency payment solutions to completely bypass traditional dollar-dominated rails. It's a massive signal that the financial architecture of the future is going to look very, very different. All right, shifting gears to Section 4, Artificial Intelligence by 2035. Let's see how the race for technological supremacy will define global power over the next decade. AI is way more than just a tech story. It's a profound geopolitical catalyst. According to surveyed foreign policy experts from the Council on Foreign Relations, there are 4 potential ways AI could reshape the global order by 2035. It all boils down to 2 variables: AI capability, is it concentrated or diffused, and global governance, is it coherent or fragmented? The consensus: most experts agree we're heading for fragmented governance, but they are totally split on who will actually hold the keys to the tech. Now, this is wild. Over half of those experts believe a US-China conflict would force superpowers to tightly lock down their advancements. They highlighted events that could accelerate AI concentration: a lab nationalization or severe accident at 60%, a US-China military conflict at 53%, and a binding international treaty at 43%. Basically, conflict would push Washington and Beijing to deepen their AI investments and aggressively protect their capabilities. So what does this actually mean for power dynamics? Well, 70% of experts believe frontier labs, not states, but private labs, will be the non-state actors gaining the most political leverage from AI. We could literally see a future where the CEOs of a few private tech companies wield more geopolitical influence than entire nations, negotiating directly with heads of state and setting the rules for everyone else. Finally, Section 5, Navigating a Multi-Order World. Let's tie these geopolitical, financial, and technological threads together to see what this means for you. The big takeaway here is that we aren't just shifting to a multipolar world, we are entering a highly complex, multi-order world. This is a fragmented global landscape where regional and thematic coalitions operate all at the same time. In this reality, the relationships within these orders are just as critical as the relationships between them. Calling it just multipolar kind of downplays the sheer, messy complexity of what we're living through today. So how do you actually survive this shift and the potential weaponization of capital? Well, top wealth managers like Julia Spare suggest a store of value portfolio strategy. It's a 3-step playbook. 1. Allocate to Swiss assets for strong equity and currency protection. 2. Hold physical gold to shield against financial repression. And 3. Secure Bitcoin in a private wallet. The strategy here is all about finding safe haven assets completely outside the traditional American financial ecosystem, especially given that non-US investors currently have record exposure to US assets. Which leaves us with one final crucial thought. As these tectonic plates shift across geopolitics, finance, and technology, how are you adapting your worldview and your investments for the multi-order era? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. The rules of the game are changing rapidly. Stay curious and stay ahead of the curve.